What do we know about mushrooms? Well, for example, that they can be terrible pathogens. Most often they inhabit insects, especially termites. Wary termite guards, if they see a worker infected with a fungus, they bring him to the cemetery and chop off his head. And then 2 guards commit self-destruction, sacrificing themselves, trying to protect the queen in the nest and the colony from infection. However, some robust pathogens are able to bypass this protection. They have a switch that delays sporulation, so insects are not afraid of spores, while fungi attract them. One termite found a fungus, the others followed him and turned out to be a Trojan horse. The guards didn't even notice anything. As a result, the fungus was transferred to the queen, and Tana fed them to the brood, and the entire colony is doomed to extinction. The mycelium of the fungus envelopes all termites, they mummify and die, and then the repelling properties of the spores protect the house from subsequent invasions. This works not only with termites, but also with many other insects, such as ants, mushroom flies, mosquitoes, bed bugs and so on. As for tomato-pathogenic fungi, millions of people die every year, for example, from such as Aspergill melon, but more on that later. For now, let's see what else they do with insects. Here is a mushroom Cardiceps, or rather an ant, which carries this mushroom inside itself. He got infected with his spore recently, but his behavior has already become suspicious. The root system has sprouted into his muscles, his body is invaded. Cordyceps stupefies the victim's brain with chemicals, turning the insect into a zombie, forcing it to look for ideal conditions for its cultivation. It should be light enough and moist enough for the parasite growing inside. For such manipulation of behavior, Cardiceps forms a complex cellular network inside the ant's body, which weaves all internal organs and controls every corner of its body at the chemical level, but at the same time, interestingly, it does not penetrate the host's central nervous system. The ant clings to the leaf with a deadly grip, and the Cordyceps show their true nature by climbing out. The fruit body of the fungus sprouts from the head of the ant. From this bag, millions of spores will fall into the air. After 3 weeks of growth, Cordyceps begins to disperse these spores, infecting even more ants. So, again and again, Cordyceps can easily exterminate an entire colony and it will simply disappear. But the danger threatens not only ants. Many other insect species also fall victim to it, because there are more than 600 species of Cordyceps in the world and each specializes in a certain type of insect. A very scary pathogen. Fortunately, it cannot attack mammals, because they have too high a body temperature, which the fungus does not tolerate. There are unique Cordyceps that not only spread spores, but also build a house for themselves. For example, they take control of a caterpillar, do not let it turn into a butterfly, and so they hibernate, gradually feeding on the victim. And as soon as the snow comes down, they begin to spread spores to catch a new caterpillar. Cordyceps 48 million years ago controlled the behavior of insects, as evidenced by the fossil found in Germany. Due to its unique biological history, this mushroom often becomes the hero of science fiction books and films, responsible for the zombie apocalypse, but it is not dangerous for humans. On the contrary, this mushroom is of great interest to scientists because it can potentially become a valuable raw material for the production of medicines, including cancer. That is, even such a monster we can find a good use for. The fact is that the fungus releases substances that protect it from pathogenic organisms, which is funny, because it is a pathogen itself. And this protective mechanism is of interest for the production of immunomodulatory, anti-infective and anti-cancer drugs for humans. Because of this, today there are even Cardiceps farms where this mushroom is grown. Instead of throwing insects at him, a special substrate is prepared for him, enriched with the necessary additives and, yes, insects. This pleasure is quite expensive, which makes Cardiceps with one of the most expensive mushrooms to grow. Such Cardiceps mushrooms can replace a significant proportion of chemical pesticides as an environmentally sound and economically stacked product. It's funny, but while some mushrooms kill ants, other ants grow them themselves. Ants grow themselves. Here is a white champignon. This fungus lives at a depth of 5 meters underground and feeds on fresh leaves of trees. Yes, 5 meters underground, it feeds on fresh leaves of trees. To get to them, a huge colony of leaf-cutting ants works for him. Millions of such ants provide food for the fungus. In return it grows tiny hyphae, which they feed on. The fungus releases chemical signals telling the ants what type of leaf it wants to eat. Scouts advance with these instructions. Worker ants walk hundreds of meters in search of a suitable kind of leaves. Today you got on a young bix tree. Only a few years old, still struggling to reach the top, where there is a lot of light, it cannot afford to lose a single leaf. But the ants don't care. Working together, they can tear a large sheet in a few minutes. Sound cutting attracts even more ants. Yes, they are a field, and they will cut everything. Then the pieces relate directly to the mushroom. These goosebumps can move at a speed of 2 meters per minute and carry a weight 10 times their own. It's like a river of leaves flowing through the ground, and it's just part of a vast network stretching for kilometers across the entire weight. To avoid blockages, Mura workers dig trenches around obstacles. Thousands of pieces are delivered every hour to the waiting mushroom. Having such a stable flow of food, the mushroom is growing rapidly, filling the entire space of its home. Therefore, ants have to dig up more space. This leads to the fact that their nests become very large, the size of a bus. The mushroom has a good position, which is not to say about the bix tree. It seems she has little chance of survival. But that's where the fun begins. The tree fights back. It starts using chemical weapons. The tree fills the leaves with a toxic toxin that can kill a distant mushroom. But the ants do not understand this, and while they take a piece of leaves to the mushroom, they themselves poison it, following the treacherous plan of the tree. This is a long-range attack. When the poison begins to act, the ants feel that their fungus is weakening, and they respond to its signals by switching to another leaf source. Thus, the chemical response of plants makes ants switch from one tree to another. It's like a punch and a counterpunch. This allows enough leaves to remain uneaten so that the tree can recover. But as you and I know, not only plants are toxic. Mushrooms in this case will give them a good head start. In front of you is a beautiful spider web. This is a very funny mushroom. It is very similar to some edible mushrooms, because it is sometimes eaten by mistake. And that's where the fun part begins. The fact is that if you eat it, then you will be fine for 2 or 3 weeks, you will have no symptoms, you will not feel anything unusual, and then you will simply die a terrible death. The fact is that these mushrooms contain a very insidious poison known as arolin, which has a very long latent period, that is, it does not manifest itself for a long time, sometimes up to 3 weeks, and only then a person has symptoms similar to an ordinary mushroom. Because of this, doctors often make the wrong diagnosis and prescribe the wrong treatment. And while you are being treated incorrectly, taxis caused kidney failure and death. Moreover, science did not know about this until the middle of the 20th century, because everyone who died from these mushrooms did not even understand what was the matter. And only when 19 people died from these mushrooms at once in the Polish city, the investigation that began was able to find out the cause. Nevertheless, even today people are often poisoned by this fungus. Another interesting case occurred with another mushroom in southwest China in a rural area in Yunnan province. Every year during the rainy season in the middle of summer, from June to August at an altitude of 1,800, 2,400 meters for unexplained reasons, quite healthy people had a sudden cardiac arrest and they died. This happened again and again until the number of dead reached 400 people. The incident was called the Yunnan sudden death syndrome. An investigation has begun. It took scientists 5 years to realize by the 2010th year that the culprit is a small white mushroom that grows on rotten wood only in this area of China. It was found that families collecting mushrooms for sale ate these small porcini mushrooms because they have no commercial value. 2 amino acids present in mushrooms were found to be toxic. After the disclosure of this information, people in the province stopped dying from these mushrooms, as the government took care to hammer this information into almost every person. But why does nature make mushrooms poisonous? There are several different theories. The hypothesis that this is how they protect themselves from pests is criticized, since even mushrooms that are poisonous to us are eaten by various creatures that are not susceptible to their poison. Therefore, today there is a more reasoned theory. It consists in the fact that different species produce different chemicals, and since there are thousands and thousands of them, it is not surprising that some of these chemicals are toxic to us. For example, you and I love sugar, but for many animals sugar is toxic, for example for cats. This does not mean that sugar is toxic by itself, it's just that not everyone digests it. Here we have the same story with poisonous mushrooms. Therefore, you should not curse them. Moreover, if mushrooms did not exist, then you and I would not exist. And here's why. As you know, mushrooms do not belong to plants or animals. This is a separate kingdom of organisms. But still, by their biological properties, they are closer to animals than to plants. And despite the fact that mushrooms and fungi are associated with death and decay, they do exactly the opposite. Mushrooms perform an important processing function, decompose dead organisms and return all these nutrients to the cycle of life. Mushrooms seem to be at the very end of the food chain, but at the same time at the very beginning. If we didn't have mushrooms, the plants would suffocate the earth. Mushrooms devour death and thus give life. This is the real digestive tract of the forest. But despite the fact that mushrooms devour all organic matter, 800 million years ago, before the appearance of this very organic matter, when the earth was bare, the first terrestrial mushrooms ate something else. They ate rocks. In the literal sense, they took and ate the most ordinary stones. And that's it for me. If you liked this video, don't forget to rate it, subscribe to the channel and click on the bell. For me, your activity, this is the best reward. Thank you for your attention. See you soon. For now.